So yesterday, watching Tim Pool's podcast, he was swatted. If you're unfamiliar with swatting, I'm pretty sure it started with gamers. One gamer would be mad or upset with the next gamer while they were online gaming, playing whatever, like Call of Duty or Halo or whatever. Call the cops, send them to your address, and say this guy has a gun, or this guy's going to commit suicide, or he's going to harm someone, or there's some crime being committed. Cops show up, kick in your door. Seems funny, really not funny at all. There's actually been situations where people have been killed as a result of swatting, so probably not something if you're a kid and you think it's funny, probably something you should just stay clear of. It's not as funny as you think. But while that happened, I learned something about situations like that and police officers entering your premises without a warrant. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I actually agree with something Tim Pool said about it. So I wanted to talk about that. So the thing that was cited that I've never heard of is something called exigent circumstances. So as let's say somebody calls and they say, "Hey, at whatever your address is, there is some man, some woman that has done X, Y, or Z. Somebody's gotten killed. Somebody has a gun. Somebody's threatening to kill people." When police officers show up without a warrant, they can enter because of what's called exigent circumstances. I don't like that. There's a specific reason I don't like that. And this is where me and Tim Pool actually agree a lot on this issue. I understand the need for safety. I understand the need to secure a location. I get all of that. I'm going to read something that I wrote, and I read this on one of my podcasts. I can't remember when exactly it was, but a couple months ago. This is something I wrote, my own words. I didn't take this from anybody else. Liberty is beautiful, and it is at times scary. Freedom comes at the cost of unknown risk. The danger, disaster, devastation, and destruction of conceding freedom and liberty at the behest of safety is so great that there is no reason sound enough, no wisdom clear enough, that I will give my freedom or liberty freely to any government for any reason. This is the problem with conceding freedoms. It seems pretty logical and pretty fair that if something is called in like that, cops should be able to enter. They have no idea what's going on, right? That seems fair. Here's the problem. How easy would it be for this exigent circumstances to be used nefariously? Let's say let's say we're in a freak world and speech was actually banned, even in private. Certain things you couldn't say. And one of your neighbors said, "Hey, yeah, they were in there talking about whatever." Cops roll up, exigent circumstances, we need to enter the premises and check whatever. It seems like such a good idea for cops to be able to enter your place of residence without the need of a warrant. It seems like, right? It makes sense. I think most people listening would say, "You know what? I actually understand that. The cops have no idea what's going on. They were called. They don't know if somebody in there is hurt. They should be able to enter." So here's the problem with that. I'm going to the US Constitution. I believe Okay, here it is. The Fourth Amendment. This is the U.S. Constitution. This is something that I don't think many people are paying attention to. We keep allowing these laws that find ways to skirt the Constitution, and we assume in our minds, well, they're constitutional because X, Y, and Z. No, if it violates this Constitution, it is illegal. The Constitution is the supreme law of our land. Now, I'm not naive. I realize that this is not how the United States has operated for years. That doesn't make any of this right. So, the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, I know there are those that would argue after listening to the Fourth Amendment, well, there's nuance to that, right? What is considered unreasonable? We could get into those discussions. The problem is, and it's cited in the statement that I wrote down that I just read. Who decides what's reasonable, and what happens when that person who decides what's reasonable is changed and somebody else comes in and they argue, well, now this other thing is reasonable. Years ago, something like the Patriot Act was unheard of. Nobody would have agreed to that. But what happened is we were all in fear. So because we were in fear, the powers that be played on that fear, and they said, you know what? The people are afraid. 2 buildings were just taken down. The Pentagon was struck at the very heart of the United States, our military nerve center and our economic nerve center. People were shaken up. And powers that be, wherever it was, moved on that fear. Fear is one heck of a motivator. It is one heck of a motivator. And this is why I say freedom and liberty is dangerous. But I would rather live in the danger of freedom and liberty than in the tyranny of I'm trying to figure out how to word this. The tyranny of the constant safety state. Nothing is completely secure. Nothing is 100% safe. Nothing you're going to do in your life, and nowhere you can go where you can escape risk. We all have to decide what risk we're comfortable taking. And over the past 2 years, we've seen what happens when we allow the government to take responsibility and ownership over what risk we should take. And that, to me, is a problem. And it doesn't seem like a problem when you're afraid. It seems like, oh, this is reasonable, right? We have this thing going on. We're all afraid. So it's reasonable for us to allow the government to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not reasonable. And the reason it's not reasonable is because we don't have any example in history of governments getting power and giving that power back. We don't have any example of that. The only examples we have in history is overreaching governments, constantly encroaching, people finally snapping, and violence breaking out. And nothing good comes out of that violence. I always say this. You can argue whatever you want to argue about the United States. The fact that we went through a revolution and a civil war and came out relatively clean on the other side of both of those two things is astonishing, because that's not something that happens in history, and you cannot expect that to be repeated. I understand that there is a great divide in the United States ideologically right now. I caution all of these people on both sides, the left and the right, that are constantly saying civil war, take to the streets, we need to do this, we need to do that. If you've never been in a war-torn country, if you've never been in a war zone, I caution you, this does not end up like you think it ends up. Nobody wins. Nobody wins. I take that back. Rich oligarchs win. Nobody else. The people with money and power, they win. They come out clean on the other side. They have more control and more money. Nobody else wins. This doesn't turn out good. I understand that when people are afraid, they just want to be safe, and they're willing to do almost anything to be safe. What I caution is, what if that quote unquote safety, this air of safety that you think you have, actually brings you more danger? This is the problem. When I heard about the whole idea of exigent circumstances, I considered it. I thought about it for a minute. Tim Pool actually happened to have Brandon Tatum on his podcast at the time. I'm not going to slander Brandon Tatum. I don't particularly agree with the way he argues in support of the police. No matter what, they always get the benefit of the doubt. The way I see this, police officers are human. They have human fears and human responses. The unfortunate thing is we have placed so much responsibility on police officers, and we've placed so much authority on police officers. It's almost too much for one person to have. I understand the position that they're in, but I'm not just going to give police officers the benefit of the doubt every time. This is the same thing that happened in World War II, Germany. I was just following orders. This is what many police officers say. And to my knowledge and my opinion, when I listen to Brandon Tatum's arguments in support of police officers, now he was he's an ex-police officer, so he would understand the position of being a police officer more than anybody else. I understand that, and I respect that. I get it. But the thing is, these people are not superhuman. They're not above reproach. If somebody tells me to go kill someone, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, right? But the way he argues in support of police officers, it gives individuals too many outs, right? So Tim Pool brought up a good point. Him and Luke Rakowski brought up points about, well, what about these unconstitutional orders? And Brandon Tatum's argument was, well, these are mandates that the governor put out, and the governor has the authority. No entity in the United States has the authority to violate the U.S. Constitution. Police officers, if I'm not mistaken, if you're a cop out there listening, correct me if I'm wrong, police officers take an oath to the U.S. Constitution. If I am not mistaken, maybe I'm mistaken on that. And if I'm mistaken on that, then I understand why they do what they do. Nonetheless, just because you're given an order, it doesn't make it right. Imagine being told, all right, I want you to round these people up, and I want you to make them dig a mass grave, and I want you to shoot them. That's an order coming from your commander. Do you do it? It's an order. This is the problem, right? We can't absolve personal responsibility. If I'm a police officer and I do something that is unconstitutional or immoral because an order was given, whenever things shake out and people are prosecuted for whatever that act is, I'm not going to be able to hide behind that order. there's no court of law that's going to go, "Oh, okay, you killed that person. It was a lawful order. I understand. We're going to let you go." No, that's not how that works. I don't I Tim Pool will never hear what I have to say right here. He might not ever hear this podcast. But if he does, Tim Pool, I put this challenge out to you. There is a former police officer from, I believe, Washington State. He's on Instagram. His name is it's Grand, Grand, Gr Anderson, Greg Anderson. So GRANDERSON 33. That's his Instagram handle. Former Washington police officer. I believe he had the right idea. He was told to do things that he felt was unconstitutional, and he walked. This is not about me bashing Brandon Tatum. I don't dislike the guy. His opinions, I'm not really a fan of some of his opinions, but he has a right to his opinions. I think a former police officer like Greg Anderson needs to be heard. That's who Tim Pool needs to have on his podcast. And he needs to get the perspective from a person like that, because in my opinion, Greg Anderson's opinions on policing is more objective and not so willing to just lean into supporting police officers every time something is done because they're police officers. Again, not putting words in Brandon Tatum's mouth. I don't know him. If I ever had the chance to sit down and talk with him, we'd probably discuss these things and we'd agree to disagree and move on, right? I don't want to be one of these people that gets online slandering people and talking garbage. I don't know him. You can't. I don't know him, and he's never done me wrong. And even if he did me wrong, and even if I knew him, I still wouldn't get online talking trash. It's not what I want to do. And as a believer, that's not the way I want to conduct myself. But anyway, Tim Pool, if you ever hear this, if you ever listen, like I said, I don't have a big reach, so I doubt this would ever get to you. Greg Anderson, that's someone you really need to have on your podcast. I think he has a better, more objective perspective on policing.